Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Dalmar, and together with my co-host Mark Cronin of Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com.
Well, Rabbi, there aren't that many Jewish judges in the Capital District.
You're right.
So we have a former Niskayuna town judge, Bruce Trachtenberg.
Thank you.
Who is very involved in his synagogue at Agudat Achim in Schenectady. And, we're very happy to have him on to talk about law. He has a family law practice and divorce law.
Right.
So
welcome
Bruce, to the Jewish View.
Well, first of all, welcome, Bruce.
Thank you.
Tell us what family law is and, what are the cases you typically deal with?
Okay, there are a number of things that I do for two different offices, really. I'm an assistant conflict defender, which is like a second string public defender. In family court is a statewide court. Supreme Court seems like it ought to be the highest court in the state of New York, but the Court of Appeals is. Every county has a family court, every county has a Supreme Court. They have somewhat overlapping jurisdiction. By jurisdiction, of course, we're talking about the power of a court to deal with the subject matter or the power of the court to deal with a person. And in terms of subject matter, Supreme Court is where you would go for a divorce. So if someone contacts me in my private practice, they may be contacting me to represent them in family court for custody, support, visitation. I might be assigned to represent a child, what we used to call the law guardian, we now call the attorney for children. I've been on the panel list for almost 35 years now.
That's an assignment from
an assignment from the court. You need special training. The appellate division in the 3rd Department is highly active in training attorneys for children. Great programs, but we get refreshers each year, and if I'm assigned to represent the child, unless it's a person in need of supervision or a juvenile delinquent, my client's always the good guy.
Mm-hmm. So, because they're a child, you mean?
Because they're the child. Yeah. For example, Judge Kramer, nice Jewish judge,
that's right.
Supreme Court Justice in Schenectady County, assigned me to represent children in a divorce case. Well, the 9-year-old child isn't the one at fault, but always often has the fallout. Sure. So my job is to pursue that child's interests, that child's desires. Many years ago when we started, and when I started as a law guardian, our job was defined as promoting the best interests. In those days, judges would actually send us out to do some investigating. Now it's strictly, you're the attorney for the child. You're the 3rd attorney in the room. If the child is old enough to properly express desires, that's what we must pursue. And if
I want my mommy, I like my mommy, I don't like my daddy.
The 12-year-old may tell me, or a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old may tell me, I want to live with mom. Now, I may find out that dad is the disciplinarian and dad is what the child needs, but my job as the attorney for the child is the same as my job if I'm representing mom or I'm representing dad. I have to pursue, within the confines of the law and proper conduct, that client's desires. Now, 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I work primarily as as an assistant conflict defender. Now, family court jurisdiction includes, besides persons in need of supervision and juvenile delinquents, support, custody, abuse, neglect cases, family offense cases. So
you're the attorney for that too, you're kind of like a judge in a way.
No, what
Monday,
would happen
Tuesday,
is, if suppose the Department of Social Services accuses someone of abuse and neglect. Chances are mom's charged and dad's charged. So the first person in the courtroom may ask for assigned counsel and get the public defender. The second person asks gets the conflict defender. A few years ago, 10 years ago, I created the family court part of the conflict defender's office when the county of Schenectady first went to it. Assigned counsel had been paid $25 an hour out of court, $45 in court. When the legislature, the court system changed it to $75 an hour across the board, counties like Schenectady added another public defender's office to save money. And I personally think that I've saved, over the 10 years, I've probably saved the county between $500,000 and $1 million just by being on salary, going into court instead of someone from the 18B panel. coming in and charging an hour at $75.
What made you want to get into the dark side of life? That's what I call this. It's really the dark side.
Well, it could be very helpful also, Mark.
No, but it's very
It
depressing.
can be,
I mean, when
and
you
it-
talk about divorce, you talk about children being
You are talking
affected by
about
this.
people where their emotions, where their nerves are their rawest.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine, I know it's hard for you, Rabbi, to imagine, but imagine that the marriage that you thought would be a happily ever after has fallen apart, or very often the parties are not even married. Can you imagine not being able to see your child in the morning when you wake up? Can you imagine not being able to even, maybe this weekend, not having a full weekend? I just tried a case this afternoon where dad only gets Saturday from 5 p.m. to Sunday at 5 p.m. And the mother of his child refuses to expand that.
Well, isn't it the mother or the court? I mean,
Well,
who's
the
in
court
charge,
order
you're saying?
from the court order from years ago says this is what he's going to get. Now here the kids are almost 9 and 10, and he wants a full weekend every other weekend. Come on, how hard is this? He wants a Monday holiday if he's off and the kids are with him on that Sunday. But can you imagine seeing your child 27 days a year?
Right.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
So
So for some of
you
these
want
people,
to get into this type of law? What was the driving force?
when I was in junior high school, my guidance counselor says, Bruce, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a lawyer and I want to be a judge, and I've done both. Very often, the first work that you get is what you end up doing, or the first job that you're in. And I started by applying to become a law guardian, and I found that family court work was very rewarding. When I'm representing somebody, for example, against the Department of Social Services, we have a woman who is beaten by the father of her children, whether they're married or not. And they charge her with abuse and neglect also because she stays in the relationship. Okay, technically, but come on, battered people their egos are chipped away and chipped away. Their self-esteem is gone. It's very difficult to break that pattern.
Do you find that this happens in one type of family over another? Like, do you find the Jewish families have the same problem that
Generally
say low
speaking,
income?
no, but abuse transcends all peoples and all economic strata.
Okay.
I remember years ago, as the attorney for a child, driving a child who had both Israeli and United States citizenship to Newark to get on a plane to Israel, and I put him in the hands of airport security. I had to get him away from an abusive situation. I got the court's permission, and the court was concerned, will he get on the plane? I said, I will drive him. And I did.
In connection with Marcus saying, I mean, you've been around, like you said, 35 years.
Just about 35 years.
And is things getting worse? I mean, I hear statistics, divorce rates are high, and unfortunately, Mark, it is in the Jewish community also, very
sure.
high rates. And so maybe you're getting a lot more business. But I mean, it's not a joke. I mean, like I say,
No, it's not.
Like you saying, I personally think I'd have a good marriage and good kids, but I do counsel people, and so I feel for exactly these people. They come with, they come to a clergyman, a rabbi, for help, for counsel, and obviously I give the best I can. And so I feel for their pain. But is it getting worse?
I
You
think
have a
so.
big range now.
Well, is it getting worse, or are we seeing it more?
Well,
We
what
have
would
in
be the
Schenectady
difference?
County less people than we did 5-10 years ago, and yet we're adding a third family court judge because of the volume. I mean, 35 years ago, when I started practicing law, there were 2 family court judges. And you'd walk in, they had a courtroom on one end, a courtroom on the other end, and a hallway. And all the people who went in to family court were in that hallway. And all the attorneys were there with a little room. Now, there's 2 support magistrates, so they've added somebody to deal with just support. There are 2 courtrooms with 2 judges. They're adding a 3rd judge. The waiting area is 5 times the size of this room and is very often filled.
Wow.
There are a lot more cases.
Of divorce. You're saying.
Well, family court, remember, doesn't handle divorce.
Oh, really?
Divorce goes to Supreme Court. So you're talking about alleged juvenile delinquents, family offenses, child support, custody, abuse, neglect, all of these different types of cases. And in family court, it's not like, well, I know the sheriff was on your show just recently. It's not like a criminal case where you go in and you're done. In family court, if you have a custody issue regarding a 2-year-old, you're going to see that family again at this time and this time and this
Next
time.
15 years.
And
That's right.
unlike other courts, in a criminal trial, you start the trial, you end the trial. In Supreme Court, in a contract case or a motor vehicle negligence case, you start the trial, you end the trial.
You don't get to know
In
the
family
yeah,
court.
You get to know the family.
Well, that too, but
Yeah.
in family court, we had the first day of testimony in June and the second day today.
2 months later, you're saying.
Yeah.
But why do you say that? I mean, so why is there a gap? 2 months
The
gap?
way that they run the calendar in Schenectady County, at least, the morning is appearances and further proceedings, and the afternoons are trial. And they'll schedule 2 trials, and you'll start at 1:30 if you're lucky, and you'll end at 4:30. How much do you get done in 3 hours? I can spend 3 hours on one witness, depending on the case. And unfortunately, the way that they've determined is appropriate is they start now and then they give you a date and they give you a date. It's very often I will ask on a complicated case, give me 3 days. Give me the dates right now so I don't have to wait 3 months to get justice for my client if I can get justice. Now, when I was town justice, I had the privilege of serving the town of Niskayuna for 8 years. And sadly, my now ex-wife had had a stroke. I had a not yet 2-year-old, and I lost re-election to a 3rd term by 61 votes.
Oh my God.
But I had my priorities
Yeah.
straight. Family has to come first.
Right.
But I would hold jury trials from time to time and non-jury trials for things like vehicle and traffic. But you started it and you went. And even if cases were adjourned a couple times, there was some end in sight.
Right.
In family court,
There's no end. Until the majority, until they
well,
reach the
if a
age of
child
majority.
is ultimately 18, you still have the obligation to contribute to support to age of 21.
Right.
So, it's unfortunate. One of the other problems that I've seen, from my opinion, is that today's generation is less tolerant. They're less understanding. They're less cooperative.
I mean, younger generation, what, the 20, 30-year-old parents or the 10-year-old kids?
Well, yes.
Yeah, both.
Yes, because, a lot of people have failed to be taught to share, to cooperate, and personal responsibility. I personally believe that you're responsible for something, you take your medicine and you learn from it. But how many times, I remember, heaven forbid, if a police officer had to say anything to me as a child, other than giving me directions or helping me find my mom or dad, there was hell to pay. Today, it's get your hands off my kid. It's not whether you've done something wrong, but did you get caught? And unfortunately, that adds to things. Now, it is unfortunate that 1 out of 2 marriages fail. But in my experience, it's better to have 2 calm households than 1 tense household.
It's interesting. It's a big question, even in Jewish idea, that I have to deal with. Like a lot of times rabbis will say, stick with it because it's good for the children. But obviously there's
times when
going
you
to
can't.
be a line, but where is that line? Because they're arguing all the time, or are surely abusive. Once they're hitting, then that's all over with.
Well, there's
But
abuse
it's
and
a
there's
good
abuse.
question, yeah.
There's
There's-
abuse, physical, and there's emotional abuse also.
There's economic abuse.
Economic abuse, yeah.
If one parent, and it doesn't always have to be mom, but it usually is at home with the child, and the other one's the breadwinner, how's the money doled out? I've seen people who are unable to escape economically, and ultimately sometimes they find the domestic violence folks and they escape and then they get on their feet. Back in 1994, the state of New York passed the Family Protection Domestic Violence Act. I was a town justice. I was president of the Albany-Schenectady Magistrates Association. Well, that law actually permits a town justice or a village justice to issue a temporary order of support. That's a family court matter. You know, town courts have limited jurisdiction. But in order to make sure that all of the justices in the Albany County and the Schenectady County knew the law, I put together a panel with some Supreme Court justices, some domestic violence people, some legislators, and we taught that course because as of January 1 of '95, town courts had this power. It's underutilized. It is underutilized to this day. But the first judicial training was going to be towards the end of February. So in order to make sure that the other justices knew, not only can you issue an order of protection, but you can issue a support order, and that's going to be good until they go into family court on that. These are changes. You had asked, is it more now than before? People are more focused on domestic violence. Unfortunately, there are people who also claim domestic violence when it isn't.
You know, wife will say,
reality.
oh, you said something wrong to me, you know, I'm getting a divorce. You're saying they're more sensitive to that. I mean, women usually, I mean, I know the situation, generally
Less
women say, I'd stay
tolerant.
married, you know, it's more tolerant, and now, like, you don't say that to me anymore, you know,
Right.
the
So
heck
they're
with
less
this.
tolerant now.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I
Really?
think that, I don't think we can be gender specific when we're talking about abuse.
Right.
I know that the studies have shown that men are physically abused as much as women are.
Really?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I subscribe to the study when I was a town justice. There's an 84% reduction in a second complaint if someone spends a night in jail. So I would fix bail. I say you're innocent as you stand before me, but bail set at whatever the dollar amount was. I miss being town justice, and I'd love to be a family court judge, but we'll see.
Let me ask you about the media. Is the media allowed in family court? Is the public allowed to sit in family
The
court?
rule well, that is very interesting because years ago they treated family court as if it was a closed court. It's not. It's as open as every other court. And if you wanted to sit in on any case, you walk in and say, I just want to observe.
Right.
And they're supposed to let you do that.
Right.
Now, when it comes to radio or television, you do have to apply to the court like any other court in the
Right.
state of New York
Well,
and get permission to
right.
come in.
But what if you just had a newspaper and you just wanted to take notes based on what was being...
Come to family court.
That's right. You
Come
can
to
go
county
in.
court. Come to
Because
any court you want to come
In Rensselaer
to.
County, there was a case of a Jewish woman who was had an issue with her children, and I wanted to go into family court to observe what the proceedings were, and
Right.
they said media is not allowed. And I said, but they are, and then they said no, and then all of a sudden, Bob Freeman, who's with the Council on Open Government, said, "Oh yes, he can be there."
Of course
By the
you can.
time he he said
Yeah,
anything.
the case was in
it
and out
over.
already.
That's right. It was
Of course.
over with.
So
Anyway, but I just want to make it clear on this program that
you
know,
have an
that-
absolute right.
Yes.
Your next door neighbor can come in just because they're nosy.
That's right.
They absolutely can. And unfortunately, as you say, by the time you're done
Arguing
fighting with
about
the
it.
gatekeeper, the case is in and out already. But sure, we've had the media apply to appellate courts to get let in,
Right.
and they should never have been denied.
Right.
Now, a judge can determine that cameras would be too disruptive,
Too
or
intrusive.
a party could object, and if a party objects, then the court has to determine is the public interest greater than that person's privacy interest. What's one of the interesting problems you run into is youthful offender status. If someone is 19 years old or younger and has allegedly committed a crime for the first time, that person is entitled to closed hearing.
Why you say first time? What would make a difference if he's a youth offender?
Because for youthful offender status under the criminal law, suppose a 17-year-old has been convicted of petty larceny.
Right.
I mean, when I was town justice, most of the kids were getting in trouble for trying to steal at what was then Mohawk Mall. And that 17-year-old is convicted. And remember that for certain violent crimes, you can be as young as 13 or 14 and get charged as an adult. But mostly we're talking 16-year-olds and older for criminal court. So the 16 or 17-year-old steals something, either pleads guilty or gets convicted after trial. Youthful offender status must be given. There's no discretion. Now, kids back a year later with a similar charge, youthful offender status is optional. It's discretionary with the court.
I didn't know that.
So what happens? Your 16-year-old's in front of you as a town justice or a village or a city court judge, and the media wants to come in, or the attorney says, wait a minute, he's youthful offender mandatory. We should do this in chambers. And no, you shouldn't, because you don't get youthful offender status until sentencing.
I got to ask you this question.
Yes, sir.
Are you packing a gun?
Yes.
Okay, because he has a thing with the daycare center I wanted to
Well,
talk
you know,
about.
it's interesting, and I'm glad you mentioned the daycare center.
What
had
is the
happened-
story? I don't know. You're
Okay.
You're going to hear it.
All
Many-
right, so let's hear the whole story. Start from the beginning.
I was town justice in Niskayuna, and the detectives were after me to get a gun because I was a tough SOB. And my then almost 2-year-old was at a daycare center, and at that daycare center, it was on a bigger campus, and I had issued orders of protection against people who worked somewhere else there. So I went to pick up my daughter. The only person in the room besides my daughter was a daycare worker who apparently escaped Nazi Germany. And when I leaned over to pick her up, she thought she might have seen that I had a handgun. Well, I did have a licensed handgun. I mean, I had told the police many times before, and I've got an alarm system in my home, I've got an alarm system in my office, I don't need a gun. And then in my my secretary was taught the drill. If someone comes in who's threatening, you take a piece of paper, you go up to the second floor, as if you're going to go make a copy, you lock the door, you call 911. Well, this guy who is 6'4", 340 or 360 pounds comes walking into my office. He's 10 feet from me, 5 feet from her, and she freezes. And he's there to argue with me about a bench warrant that I'd issued for his arrest. And I realized that he could have just as easily been carrying a shotgun. So I conceded to the police, I got a handgun, I learned how to use it. So here I am in daycare. Pick up my child, and they said, and a week or two later, the daycare executive director said, do you have a gun? I said, yeah. Well, you can't bring it here. And I said, well, then I can't bring my daughter.
And this was at Pooh's Corner?
This was, yeah, many, many years ago.
Yeah.
It's 20 years ago.
Okay.
So I wanted my deposit back. It was foolish. 2 months later, they smear me with this pistol-packing papa crap. I mean, first of all, there was no danger to anybody. Secondly, it was a licensed handgun. Finally, some of the radio personalities called it as they saw it. It was a hatchet job. And that's the story.
And you moved your daughter to a different
I moved my
daycare.
daughter to a different daycare, and I said before we went to this other daycare, what's your position on firearms, handguns, licensed handguns?
Right.
And they said,
it's clear that you got to say licensed.
Oh, absolutely.
I haven't been saying that.
licensed and trained
Right.
and hidden,
Right.
and it was never shown to anybody.
Right.
And the one person who thought I might have had one thought she might have seen it, and no one else is there. I'm the last person
Right.
to pick up the
Yeah,
kids.
yeah, yeah.
Okay?
So
and then they smear me in the paper, and of course that has unfortunate political ramifications. But the new daycare, I said, what's your position? This is why I'm moving Ezra Ella. And actually the Kinder Care has a great program, and she thrived there. And they said, Our home base is in the state of Washington, and we serve a lot of CIA folks.
Yeah.
So we have no problem with that.
That's great.
So,
So you found the
I'm
right
so
fit.
happy you brought that one up.
Well, you know, you know what? It's important to
Clear the air.
clear the air.
Do you
and
know how
because
many? Yes, and I'm glad you cleared the air.
Oh,
sorry.
You gotta put it through the loop.
Do you know how many judges?
Through the loop.
Carry-
Through the bottom, and then,
Yeah, okay.
okay.
That's not going to work. Do you know how many judges have licensed handguns?
I would say everyone.
A majority of the judges I know, whether they're on a local criminal court or the town court, or whether they are Supreme Court justices, or I know the surrogate court, most carry.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. Our society is more violent. As I said earlier, I fought the concept, but the police insisted.
Right.
And when I was finally, and the other interesting thing for me is, in all the times that I was threatened,
You were threatened.
oh, God, yes. I mean, I arraigned some
As
guy.
a judge, you're saying,
Oh,
or as a
yes.
lawyer?
Yes, both.
Both.
In all the times I was threatened, like as town justice, I'd arraign somebody at 2 in the morning, I'd remand them to jail, and I'd hear them say in not so polite terms, I'm gonna get you and your whole family. And that one fellow, I came back in on Wednesday night, and I called him forward, and I said, don't
Fix his mic.
say anything,
Yeah.
but if you're anywhere near me or my family,
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I have to do this.
That's okay. There.
Okay. And just clip it onto your.
Good thing Mark's a mechanic besides.
I'm glad
Up,
Mark's
move
a
it up, move it up.
I'm glad Mark's a mechanic,
No,
and
move the clip up. Yeah, thank you very much.
There you go.
I'm glad
Now you're
Mark's a
good.
mechanic, because obviously
So now
I
he
couldn't
was-
do it, you're having. and
I'm a
I-
rabbi, I can't change a light bulb, that doesn't
So-
come part of my 10 jobs.
Okay.
So I said to him, if you're anywhere near me or my family or my home, the police will arrest you if they get there in time. So,
Let me ask you one other
It's
thing.
a
Sure.
dangerous position, you think, a
it is.
judge is.
But
a
the only
nice-
time I've ever been assaulted is in family court.
Really?
Representing a woman against a guy who was obviously dangerous.
And what did he do, slap you? Or?
No, he stomped on my foot, and he did 15 days for it.
Oh, okay. We won't do that to you. The Vada Kashrut.
Yes,
is
I'm on the board.
Kosher supervising agency.
I'm on the board of the VOD.
Right, and you're the treasurer? No.
Technically, technically, yes.
yes? Okay.
Technically, yes, but I warned them, I'm not a CPA, I'm not an accountant, and they show me what they've done, and it's fantastic.
Okay.
So, yes, in name, I'm the treasurer.
Okay, so tell me about your experience with the VOD.
The VOD is fantastic. The VOD, and years before I joined the VOD, years before I was asked to be the Agudat Achim, one of the 2 Agudat Achim representatives, I would tell people in my own style, I guess, or lack of style, Jews go to the circus. I go, what do you mean by that? Jews are out in the world with everybody else. In those days, you could get a kosher meal on an airplane. And I suggested to all my friends, order kosher. Even if you don't have kosher at home.
Right.
I know you don't keep kosher at home. That ain't salmon on that sandwich. Order a kosher meal. Why? Because that ensures that it's available for other people.
That's right.
15% of American Jews keep kosher. And that's usually at home with their own modified version outside.
Right.
They'll have a hamburger, maybe not a cheeseburger.
Right.
But of course, the kids today, I think, have the cheeseburgers anyway.
Yeah. Chipotle is very popular with the kids, yes. Okay.
So it's very important to me that the VOD exists. It's very important. Rabbi Baumzer, I love the man. I love the
So you
executive
keep kosher
director.
at home?
I do.
Okay.
And in fact, there was a professor locally, and years ago, my folks used to come up to visit, and they had 2 rules. They weren't going to be babysitters for the kids, and like during Passover, they wanted interesting people to come. So I invited a professor, and his wife said, well, he'll eat fish at your house. And then she saw my 3 sets of pots and pans,
Right.
my meat, milk, and parve, my 3 sets of everything, and realized this is a kosher home, so he can eat anything at my house. But that's important to
There
me.
you go, Alavai. Okay.
So,
We're out of time. It's very
I can't
interesting.
believe we brought-
It just flies by. We're having a good time with an old friend. is a judge or former judge, Bruce Trachtenberg.
You know, they still call me judge. It's a nice thing. It's
Well,
like
you're
being a
always a-
general.
yeah.
That's
It's
it.
like-
Once, you know, there's a Jewish law, very fast, we only have a few seconds, but when you go up with holiness, you don't go down. So once
Right.
you're a judge, you're always a judge.
That's
right.
fantastic.
In any case, we want to wish you a lot of success in all your
Thank you so
endeavors.
much.
And please do it with good health.
Yes, best of success.
Alavai Amen.
Okay.
And thank you for having me. It was a joy. I can't, and
It's
I
a pleasure.
sat here and talked and talked and talked for. The
That's a
time
good
went like
lawyer
that.
over here.
The
Good talk.
time went like
Thank
that.
you.
So thank you so much.